Mm-hmm.
And I got a question about that. You know, we see it all the time, black on black crime. And this first thing crossed my mind, and I know my attitude with it. Why does this have to happen? So, do I try to not get into that? Because it's only for maybe a minute, if that long. And then I think about, what they could have done to avoid that. Is that what we're supposed to be focusing on?
No, we shouldn't be thinking about what they could have done to avoid it. Um, we should be focusing on um, balance and harmony. And all the things that we see, you see more of it now, I believe, because our focus is on balance and harmony. And because, of the media. But somebody's got to stay focused on balance and harmony. Because if you start asking the questions of why did that have to happen, it implies to me that we're questioning um, the path that I don't know what path you have to take to get to truth. I don't know what path anybody has to specifically take to get to truth. And so to question it implies to me that um, I know all about their lives, blah, 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 blah. And to question it also says that, okay, once I follow that rabbit down the hole of questioning and I get to what I think is the answer, is that really the answer? Is that really the reason? Is that really the truth for that situation? But I do believe, though, that when it comes in your mind, just let it go. When you start questioning it, it starts kind of holding it in place. If you know what I mean. Why did that have? It starts. Uh, it's like a butterfly that you pin down. That the student pins down. Once you start asking the why and you really don't. My question is, why do you want to know the why of that situation? But it's like it pins it there, and the more it pins it there in your focus, the more you think about it, and then you start meditating on it. I mean, unaware, you start thinking about it. So,
But it's gonna come, Barbara.
can you just turn the shades up a little bit, please?
Yes, ma'am.
It's kind of glary. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm at the point where I don't even listen to the news that much. But sometimes it just pops in.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's
it's
gonna.
gonna come.
I agree.
So
I agree.
it's not that I'm not meditating on it. I'm just trying to figure out what things I should think on when that comes. Because I want to immediately get away from it. I don't want to feed
And the other one too.
even a drop of milk to it.
Ma'am.
The other one also a little bit more.
I'm gonna close the blind.
Thank you.
even
I
wanna
don't need
feed
it
a
really
drop of
close just to
milk it.
glare. I'm sorry.
I said I don't even want to feed a drop of milk to it.
It's so
You know. So that's what I'm
Betsy, as long as you don't let it take a place in your space,
mm-hmm.
in a sense. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of times thoughts come, and you might examine that thought, and then you let it go.
Mm-hmm.
But when you let it take a place in your space, in a sense, um, it's sort of like you give it a home. You say, okay, come on in, sit down, in a sense. When you give it space, when you give it a place in your when I say space, I mean your.
Yeah, I know exactly what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Um, it's like we were talking about with what happened last week with the British monarchy and how things have changed drastically. Um, my belief is that it's been the same for centuries. It's been the same for centuries. The expectation of the royals has been the same for centuries.
But Harold just decided to break the curse.
And then when we meditated and we said, okay, bring balance and harmony. If it's been the same for centuries, and you got people in the streets, and then you got the monarchy who were supported by people in the streets, as well as the riches they got from previous monarchies that was passed down. And then these two say, okay, we don't want to be tied to as closely to this. We know we're in the family. You can't ever not be in your family, regardless of whether they showing you what you were born in the. but we want to do our own thing, and we say, well, what happened? Well, look at the bigger picture. I'm, I believe that that's occurring so that at some point we'll have more balance and harmony. Same with everything else that's happening. Another example might be someone who chooses to go shoot a schoolhouse or something like that. And you ask the question, why did this have to happen? You ask that question, and you can ask. That's a legitimate why question. There are a lot of legitimate why questions, but don't let that why question take a place in your space so much that.
So more so than why, what can I do, or what should I have been doing
What
to
I
avoid?
you can't avoid it.
But to bring balance.
Yeah,
put
you
it
can't
like
avoid it. So what I usually do is, I usually just thank the universe for balance and harmony. In the face of that, I thank the universe for balance and harmony. That's hard to do, because that says that I'm supposed to be seeing something beyond what's in my face right here.
Can I use an example that's kind of personal? Last night I got a phone call from one of Jay's friends, and the young man who committed the assault on my brother, he's out of jail. But we were supposed to get a call, so I called my brother who's handling that part, and he said, yes, he's out. I can honestly say, I went to sleep last night with this kind of fear, like, is this dude gonna show up? But your question, Miss Betsy, and your answer, Miss Barbara, kind of made me think at some point this morning I thought, wait a minute, you're operating in fear, which we had discussed in here. But your answer brings a little more clarity of my question, why? Why did I opt immediately to go to fear? That was my question this morning. But my answer, my thought should be more along the lines of, okay, Creator, I'm going to trust that you're bringing balance and harmony to this entire situation. That sounds like is that more the mode we should be learning to move towards? Because I feel like I'm still learning that.
That's what gives me, that's what settles the beginning chaos in me.
Okay.
When you said that's what gives me settlement,
Peace.
to my
Yeah.
spirit.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking too, even though that's in your face and you're seeing that the balance that it has brought or you have brought to other situations that may have occurred. Even though you don't see it. So just thank the universe for the balance.
Yeah.
Call things as though they were.
That says you trust. That says, okay. I mean, people have died in our lives. I mean, for someone to get ripped out of your physical space, but it's still all about trusting. One of the things I said when my children went off to school was, okay, God, you loaned them to me, because I birthed them, you gave them life, and you've loaned them to me all these years. Okay, back at you. They're yours again, fully. And although they come back and they bring their baggage back into your lives sometime,
They're in His hands.
I don't know anybody else who can hold them and keep them other than the Creator, as well as the Creator. I don't. And so even when there's stuff that's perceived to be so negative that comes in, it is what it is. Okay, Creator, you know more about what's going on than I do, and I just have to trust that whatever happens, you got this. You got this. That's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. But at some point, if you keep plugging at it, you'll get to that point where you just rest in that.
So you keep yourself in balance and trust that it's gonna reverberate from you to out there, wherever it's needed.
Yes. And you're right, Betsy. You probably don't see nearly any of what happens as a result of um, um, your calmness and your rest in knowing that and understanding that the Creator wants the best for you and for everybody else. And you don't see, we don't see any of that. And there's so much stuff that happens because remember we're talking about worlds and worlds and worlds and worlds, and you touch so many different worlds and we don't even know it. We don't even know it. Same with this, because what you put out there, other people have access to. You don't even know it. Could be somebody in the Himalayas, somebody in China. So we could ask the question: well, why is this virus kicking up? You know, this coronavirus. You can look at some of the signs of what's happening as a result of this coronavirus. You know, people are paying attention. Medical people are paying attention. Blah 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 blah. And in a sense, it's bringing countries together because they're concerned about what happens with this virus in their country. There's research that's going to occur, and that research is going to be available to other countries. I was watching History Channel and talked about all these plagues that have happened over the years. Where with the Spanish flu, 20 million people died. With the plagues in Europe, what happened there, and that's on a much larger scale in terms of catastrophes. But it's like, you know, there was growth at a time that well, I won't say that because the Creator can always sustain what He creates.
You know what I found?
People got past that.
Mm-hmm.
People got past that.
What I found interesting about this virus is that it kind of opened China up because they're having to let others come in and help and assist them.
Same with the SARS.
Yeah.
And it keeps coming from that area. So I don't know, Betsy, if I can give you something. You've got to find something that resonates with you.
And I have. As long as I keep the balance in me, it reverberates out there. And trusting that the Creator, well, I know that He knows what He's doing, but just trusting within myself that He's gonna take care of it, no matter what the situation is.
Mm-hmm. And no matter how it seems to us.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Was it last week you talked a little bit about the woman at the well too, Sister Mary? Look at all of the perceived negative things that have happened in the world and the conversations that are occurring as a result of those things. And the fact that they've been hidden. Somebody knew it, but they've been hidden for so long. But now on a world stage, some of those conversations are occurring now, as with climate change and my president and Greta Thunberg, my president and this little 18-year-old, and climate change, and then you've got and look what's happened as a result of climate change. Look what's happening in Brazil with the big fire, and Australia with the big fire, and you know, and people are thinking about the extinction of the animals in Australia. Well, thankfully, not a lot of people have gotten injured. But the issue still is there's a problem with climate. And until we get balance within ourselves, the universe, the environment won't be balanced. And so, part of what we've done is created the space for um, brush fires, etc., etc., etc. If that's what it takes to begin to balance the universe, then so be it. That's where we have to be. If that's what it takes. As bad as it seems, as bad as people getting killed, as bad as animals getting burned, as bad as the earth getting scorched, earth will grow back. The Aborigines learned years ago that they had to create a burn, a controlled burn in their areas to clean it out for new growth to take how do you say it, to take hold. And some of the scientists are saying we ought to be listening to the Aborigines. Duh, yeah. But they had that close tie to the earth, such a close tie that they knew what to do and when to do it and where to do it and how to do it, so that it wasn't a negative impact on them or the environment. We've lost that, and maybe and perhaps all of this is a way to begin to point to our connection with the earth that we live, with this terrestrial ball that we live on physically. Greater than that is our connection with the Creator spiritually. I don't know what's been in the news that much lately either. I have just not had the notion to watch any impeachment stuff. Tired of it. Um, I know that I have to at least know what's going on, but I'm trusting that what's going to happen is going to happen. And when it happens for the reason it needs to happen.
I heard something interesting this morning. Our space exploration is getting ready to consider going to Venus, and they made the analogy of Venus, Mars, and Earth, where we sit in between. But Venus is a hot fireball with a lot of carbon dioxide, and Mars is more like a desert. And they were saying they could see, they think Venus is the oldest, but they feel like there's an analogy between all three of them in the type of world we could become, either a desert or a hot fireball, if we don't figure out what you were talking, climate change. And I thought that was really interesting that a lady was saying we need to go to Venus, or we need to study it, not people go there, but actually put some things on it to see what it evolved from and what it became, so we can understand we don't need to be making those same mistakes here. And I thought that was an interesting perspective, considering most exploration is about let's go over there and see if it's sustainable life in terms of, people moving there. But she was talking about how we might learn some lessons about how we ought to treat our planet. And I thought that was really interesting.
I can see that. Wisdom is knowing the end in the beginning. But how many of us take advantage of knowing the end in the beginning once we know the end? Somebody will, but somebody won't.
I have a question. I was looking up what does the crown mean? The corona means,
Mm-hmm.
and it says astronomy. It says the ratified gaseous envelope of the sun and other stars. The sun's corona is normally visibly only during a total solar eclipse, when when it is seen as an irregularly shaped pearly glow surrounding the darkest disk of the moon. And as far as the anatomy, it says a part of the body resembling or likened to a crown. And I'm wondering, what does that have to do with, we had a new moon yesterday, yesterday, the 24th. And I'm wondering, how does that connect to what's happening in the universe now? It's a crown, it's likened to a crown, and then it envelops the sun and other stars.
Well, first part of what you said was that the corona was that area around the sun that can be seen, I think you said, during darkness
Is eclipse.
of an eclipse. We all know that the physical is simply a reflection of spiritual things.
Right.
To me, to be able to see that corona is sort of that light part that you see around in spite of the darkness. I mean, it gives me a positive reverberation.
Right.
In that, regardless of how much darkness there is always light in that darkness. I don't know why they call this virus coronavirus, except that from a spiritual perspective, there is darkness and people getting sick and people dying from a physical perspective. But those of us who see beyond the physical understand that when someone dies, that is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
There are people who don't see that though. The end is knowing wisdom is knowing the beginning and the end and the beginning. We know that end. We know that that's just the next step on another journey.
Right.
But for those people who saw those hundreds of thousands of people who died in the earthquake in December that year, or who see people dying because of Ebola, or seeing people who are dying because of SARS and because of this coronavirus, because of the Spanish flu, etc., etc. If they don't see that, it's like doom to them. To me, it's a reminder of the promise of light, that there's always light. There's always light.
And
Does someone have? Wait a minute. Let's see if someone has a different or can add to that if they'd like.
Okay.
Anybody want to add to that? Because you may see something I don't see. Okay. I'm gonna ask a second part. One of you.
Well, my thing, why was it in the anatomy? It's like a crown. It's likened to a crown.
Anatomy of what?
It just says anatomy, a part of the body resembling or likened to a crown.
A corona?
Yes.
I'd have to look that up. I can't speak to that.
What hurts me when you read it, having read it in Miss Barbara talk, it makes me think of the
crown on the king's head authority.
I'm trying to think what not karma, but when it talks about how we have to grow from our most animalistic to our most spiritual being. Oh my gosh, I can't remember.
Chakra? Crown
yes,
chakra?
The chakras. Right. The crown being, your connectivity between your spiritual and your physical self, as opposed to just your animalistic, your tailbone, your animalistic like. So when it says, when you say corona, it makes me think that you've reached you're dealing with things from your higher self. Understanding that it's about your light that you give off, no matter how dark things may seem. But that's what it makes me think of when you say that.
I hear you. I just haven't put together the thing about the anatomy yet, because I'm looking it up too, and I haven't put it together yet. But it'll come. Yeah, you may be able to tell us. No. Let's see what it is. Biology. Any other questions or comments?
It seems like every time that we're about to have a major shift, there's a sickness, something like this corona, a virus, something that comes up. Because we had the Ebola, and now this is the corona, and it's like something is really happening, and we about to see a major shift in the universe with all the purification. The countries being burned, Australia, these places are being burned, which represent purification. It's just like it seems as if there's a major something has changed, and we're about to see things unfolding.
Can I suggest that we're
Sure.
already in the midst of the shift?
Okay, yeah,
Already in
that's
the midst.
fine. Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes in the midst of the shift, there's so much going on that all you can see is chaos.
Which I think is a distraction.
Yes, it is. And you think, wow, why is this going on? Why is when in the meantime, it really is doing what it's supposed to be doing, to get to that, whatever that next. I'm trying to not do things in time. I'm trying to the next phase of us or the earth or whatever. But it's in these times that all we see, a lot of people see, is the chaos, and that's why we are here. We got to take the